of the things that could solve rugby's problems. You could drop it to 13
I was going to say,
you honestly could.
Yeah.
But people, for whatever reason, that's too much like rugby league. We can't consider it. Or you widen the fields. Now, it's probably a lot difficult to widen fields all around the world.
Yeah.
It's probably easier to take. But it's never been considered because I think they would feel it's jumping into rugby league territory.
Yeah, because it's a big game with a lot of followers globally. Yeah. I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And but it's losing followers and it's losing therefore losing attractiveness in terms of revenue and sponsorships, and therefore
here in particular, here in New Zealand,
Australia,
here in New Zealand, globally it's going great. Like World Cups are fantastic. Women's there's so many aspects of the game that is really healthy, but you read Australian media, in News Corp, Fox Sports used to have the game. Since they've lost it, then they're not
it's
a positive.
It's on stand now or something.
That's on stand now, but it's not a positive media. It's not positive in the media at the moment, rugby, but it isn't going great here in Australia at the professional level. Other levels of the game are great, but what we see on TV, all we see on TV is really Super Rugby and Test footy, and Super Rugby is probably the big one that's hurting us. Test footy will always be healthy, but the Wallabies haven't been successful, so we're sort of we're reacting to their performance of late. That's why the game is viewed as if it's not that healthy because the Wallabies aren't going well. Super Rugby is the big problem.
But why would you say the Wallabies aren't going well? I mean, let's just. I mean, is it because of 10 years ago the kids who are growing up and who have now become Wallabies, they have don't have the right skills, or what's the case?
No, like the international market's become very competitive. Like during my playing era, you could have got to Europe at the start of your career. A couple of people were going to France, and a few people were starting to enter the Japanese league. Now, like those markets are huge. USA's got competitions. So that's not, the global market is one of the reasons. I would say, and again, this is really polarising because we've just cut a team as in Melbourne Rebels. We've just not had...
Well, they went broke.
They went broke and they've been broke. They've never been a financially successful model. So the game has been pouring money into, and it's not just hurt Melbourne, it's hurt New South Wales, it's hurt the Brumbies, it's hurt everyone, and it's hurt Perth. Like Perth's got Twiggy Forrest there, who's obviously a very successful backer of the side. So we've never had the talent to sustain 5 elite Super Rugby teams. And when I think we brought in Melbourne because it was private money, it was Harold Mitchell. And I think the game viewed it as...
He
passed away a couple of years ago. But he only held the licence for a couple of years.
Right.
Once he realised it wasn't working, he handed the licence back over to Rugby Australia. And they've been propping up the Rebels for a long, long time. I just don't think we've had the talent at that elite level for 5 teams. When you think, put it in these terms, there's 5 teams at the moment with a $5 million salary cap each versus 16 NRL teams with $13 million salary cap. How are you going to compete on that front?
Well, why isn't they don't have the talent? Because is it because the pool of talent where the kids grow up in playing footy is sort of still restricted to private schools?
Well, I think the talent, like you've got kids at the schools that I went to Waverley, the CAS, the GPS, there's probably a dozen AFL players now that have come from CAS and GPS as non-AFL players. They've gone and got the best locks, the kids that are going to be 190, 195 centimetres. AFL teams have gone out. They've just got great recruitment tools. So all these young players, it's hard to get good tall players, a lot of them playing AFL. We've got enough good players for a really good club competition, and I think club footy is excellent. It's healthy and it's thriving. But just at Super Rugby level, the 5 teams haven't been performing enough against the Kiwi teams, and it definitely hasn't helped the Wallaby performance. Like you can't argue that one. In the performance over the last 10 years since we went from 3 teams, it was Queensland, New South Wales and the Brumbies, and then we went to Perth, and then we rushed to Melbourne a couple of years after Perth. And that was when you noticed the player drain. It was probably easier for players to get contracts, and they weren't going through that club system and getting the 20, 30, 40 games of club footy where they're getting bashed up by a 30-year-old, where they're getting hardened by playing second grade and third grade. A lot of kids were coming out of schools and going, and because of the competition and the offers from league, I was like, I got an offer from South, I got an offer from Roosters or Western Force, so I'm going to make a big offer. I'm going to stay in rugby, and they'll get into Super Rugby probably a little bit quicker than it had happened previously.
And because they weren't hardened enough, or at least experienced enough,
I think so,
to play at that level.
Yeah,
but in terms of
then they weren't playing enough games. Super Rugby's a 16-game season, and they weren't all getting sent back to play club footy. And you go from
why not?
I don't know, academies, programs, all that sort of off-season tours and all that sort of stuff, and players being relocated to different parts of the country. So Yeah, I think that's a big reason. Like the number of games, you mentioned before, like 40 game season for a kid is what you should be doing.
Yeah.
And, I reckon at professional level, you could go and do a survey. You've probably got maybe 20% of players who aren't, like the Wallabies. I'll use last year as an example. I got 30 minutes out of one professional player after the Super Rugby for the round week season. I got one player for 30 minutes.
You can't say to them, you've got to come play.
No, they've got to want to. The game needs them to play. World Cup year is a bit of an anomaly because they're sort of wrapped up in cotton wool. They're in training camps, and I don't expect to get the Wallabies. Like the Wallabies are playing there, but the fringe players who are, they're following the Wallabies around and they're used for training sessions at the Wallabies and
as opponent.
Yeah, you got a squad of 35 travelling around. It's like the Origin taking two sides, and then Trent Robinson not being able to get access to the reserves the day after or the day before a Wallaby game because they're flying to New Zealand next week and they've got a week off and then we're going to South Africa and we're not sure about this. So there's just always been that issue of not letting players get back and playing enough club footy after Super Rugby.
So it's I mean, pardon me saying it sounds like a mess, to be honest with you.
No,
because
I'm not offended at that. Like
No,
that professional side of the game, it is. Like,
and you would say professionals not at the club rugby level?
No, the club rugby is awesome. Like the perception of the modern day player, and I got a complete shock in a good way of these guys get paid nothing. They train 3 nights a week. They get their weights in beforehand. Some of them aren't getting home till midnight. They're finishing training at 8:30. They're doing their weights till 10 o'clock. They're getting up. They're going to work. They're on the tools at 6 a.m. They're the heartbeat of the game, and that's where I get to see that now. And club footy is always junior footy, women's footy, sevens. So many elements of the game is thriving and going really well, but we're just not seeing enough of it because we're seeing Super Rugby and Test footy on TV.
What would you do in terms of Super Rugby?
Yeah, there's a big part of me that thinks it's
Wallabies.
probably run its race, to be honest.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. Super Rugby only came out in the mid-90s because of pay TV. Prior to that, if you played for New South Wales, it was like Origin. You maybe got 3 games a year. You got a tour to New Zealand, maybe Argentina. Then we started this Super Rugby with New Zealand, Australia and South Africa. And I think the audience, I was a kid, but everyone just was so excited about, the best players in South Africa being in Sydney one week. And I just think over time it probably got a little bit stale. I don't know if club footy has always been, they've tried all these different comps in between. They've tried a couple of national club competitions, but they've never tried competitions consistently with the jerseys that we're all familiar with. And everyone in the region has you could be an East fan, you could be a Gordon fan, you could be a Brothers fan or a University of Queensland. Those jerseys and teams and supporters have been around for 100 years. But we've never given them a crack to be in a national competition. We've tried all these different national competitions, but because we didn't want to alienate or offend some teams, because you can't have every club in a national comp, we've decided to start a national comp with 8 new teams, 8 new jerseys, the Sydney Rays, New South Wales Country, which isn't New South Wales Country, and Western Sydney Rams, and all these teams that none of us have any affiliation with. So that hasn't worked. In terms of the Super Rugby, that's a really tough one because South Africa gone, they've gone up to the Northern Hemisphere now, and they're playing in a great competition with the Welsh. They're in a Gaelic league with the Welsh, the Irish, and the Scots, and they're now thriving, and it's helped South African rugby. I lived in America for a couple of years in 2020 and 21. I was coaching rugby over there, and I looked at what they were doing with what they do with football or NFL or gridiron, sorry. I reckon we could copy something very similar. Friday nights, we'll put it this way, I don't watch my school play. I can't. I'm coaching Randwick at the same time. So your audience is fighting against each other all the time. So I can't watch Waverley play, but in America, you can watch your high school play because they play Friday nights. So you could run a good Friday night competition and you could still go down there. And if you're an East fan, you could go and watch East the next day. And all those supporters that went and watched Scots versus Cranbrook, or they could go down and also watch East versus Gordon on a Saturday. And you could put your pro footy on a Sunday like the NFL do, plus a couple of, like a Thursday night and a Monday night. So gridiron in America is never competing against each other for bums on seats or eyeballs. And they've got multiple channels covering it. It's not just Channel 9 and Fox. It's not just Stan. They've got like five or six networks. Like one has a Thursday night game. There's no Friday night professional game of football in America. Saturday's all college. So you can watch everything as a football fan in the States. Whereas here you've got to pick something. I've got to watch Randwick. I can't watch Waverley. And then I've got to rush home to watch the Waratahs. They're on at 5:30 in New Zealand. all in the space of 3 hours.
It's funny you say that because you get a Scots Joey's game,
Yeah.
and like it's packed.
Yeah.
It's packed.
That's right.
But if East are playing Randwick at the same time, someone's got to make a decision.
That's right.
And neither one will be backed.
That's right.
Or they're going to go to one and not go to the other one.
Yeah.
But it sounds like we got an administration problem here.
Yeah, like
It sounds like a decision-making problem at the top, and no one's prepared to make decisions. Is the reason they have the Super Rugby, is the reason they have that, though, is because they thought it was a product they could sell in terms of broadcasting?
I believe so. That's where the money came in from.
Yeah.
I think it started, it was sort of like a Super League scenario.
Yeah.
There was going to be another competition after the 95 World Cup, and guys like Phil Kearns will speak better to this, but they were all brought into meetings. They were all about to walk and sign with another competition, and then Super Rugby was born out of pay TV, Fox Sports backing it a long, long time ago. And so it was a revenue raiser, and it helped the Wallabies because we had 3 teams, and these guys went from being amateur to professional, and it helped us win the 99 World Cup, and we were sort of the leaders in the world of rugby. And then we made the final in 03, and then it sort of over time gradually just disappeared into where it is now.
Do you think it's the same issue in New Zealand then?
Yeah, New Zealand's a weird one. Like they're going through. They've got private equity money in New Zealand, and so I know they've had some really big challenges of late. They've had potential threats of other competitions. So that's when you know it's a concern. When you're watching really, like, these are the best players in the world. You're watching the Auckland Blues play against the ACT Brumbies in a round game, and you're getting 10,000 people there. The Brumbies haven't lost. The Brumbies have lost like 1 or 2 home games. I'm going to say no more than 4 home games in the last 3 or 4 years, and they had a home final on the weekend. And there would have been, I say, 8,000 people there. The Raiders will go there the next day, and they'll get 16 or 18,000. That used to be the exact opposite.
Well, yesterday on Monday, we had Canterbury Bankstown play. The Bulldogs play Parramatta. There's 45,000 people there at Accor, like a club game. I mean,
the Swans the other day, 42,000 people.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah.
So
rugby can get back to that.
But what is it? I mean, there's something
Well,
missing.
they've got to win, and again, that goes back to the number of teams and the players that are getting spread out, and players are getting put in these teams a little bit too early because there's now 5 teams. You've sort of doubled the number of professional contracts. Well, they have. They've gone from 3 teams to 2 plus a 7s program. So they've doubled the number of professional contracts in a 10-year period. We haven't got a high number of participants. If anything, we've been plateaued because AFL and league and soccer are, working hard to get our junior players, or they're working hard to get access. So we haven't had the talent pool to go to 5 teams. That's hurt performance. People aren't silly. They want to go and see winners, and they want to go and see a good style of footy. The Waratahs got, they didn't have a good couple of years, but they were also 3 or 4 wins away from getting back up to 25, 30,000 people. Sydney's fickle.
But do you think, okay, well then, I don't know who it was. I guess it's the AAU, but they did make an attempt. The previous administration of the AAU, not the current administration. I'm not talking about Phil Ward, but I'm talking about the previous administration of the AAU. They went to Joseph Sua'ali'i, or at least to his manager.
Yeah,
and they're paying him to join rugby union, which is next year, 1.6 a year. I mean, is that an attempt to sort of glamorise rugby union and try and bring back the supporters?
Yeah, I think it's a reflection of the previous administrator. It was a media play. He's a great talent. He's a rugby boy previously.
He's a King's boy.
He's both. I was coaching the Aussie Sevens, and he came in as a 15-year-old and did a session against us, and was just like, I went to Tim Walsh, who was their coach. I said, can we take him to, I think we're playing in Dubai. I said, no, I'm not allowed. He's too young. He was 15 and he was ready to play. He was that good. I think it's been it was an ego negotiation, to be honest. And I don't think it was, I'm really happy he's coming to the game, but I'm also a bit fearful that the pressure that'll be put on him because the game can't afford that salary.
How does it work? Like if I'm in the team,
players are good like that. I think players, I don't think it's going to offend players.
No?
No. I think.
Well, what about if I come to negotiate my contract?
Well, that's what's happening. Players in that position.
He's at 1.6. He hasn't played rugby union since he was at school.
It hasn't just cost the game 1.6. It's cost the game a lot more because players in the same position. Marky Nonganitawasi is now gone to the Roosters. Jorgensen, young kid who could have gone to the Roosters. These are same position.
But Jorgensen signed up rugby. Yeah.
But they've all gone in, and their agents have all gone in and said, right, well, he's 1.6. My player was 4.
That's my starting point.
Now 5 or 6, So it's definitely, it won't hurt. He'll be really well accepted from a playing group in rugby.
Yep.
Rugby will be great like that. It'll just be the constant media scrutiny that he's already getting. It'll be that, and I just don't know if. I just hope it's an enjoyable experience for him. But he could be a superstar of the game. But at the same time, $1.6 million bucks. And Rugby Australia, I think they operate off like a $50 or $60 million a year. They've got no money. They borrowed $80 million. So let's say they're operating off $50 million bucks a year. You've got $1.6 million of that 50 going to one player.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah.
And then everybody else is going to go up from there. So they're all going to say, well, that's 1.6, I'm 1.1 or I'm 1.2 or I'm currently more than what I'm more than I'm currently getting. So you pay me more.
And the scariest thing about all of these negotiations for players is if Rugby Australia don't pay it, Panasonic in Japan will pay it, Suntory, Toulouse, Toulon, Northampton.
Will they pay this sort of money?
Yeah, they'll all pay big money. Most people in Australian rugby could be getting more money elsewhere.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's the scary thing about this. Like the overseas market is so much stronger.
Oh, but like when you say, you just mentioned some French sides, but is that because of the conversion of the dollar, or they just pay more money?
They're all privately owned. They've got larger salary caps. They've got bigger TV deals. Like there's money in the game of rugby. Yeah, just not here.
Yeah, so we just lost another one of our players to Japanese rugby. The Roosters have.
Yeah.
And
Joe Manu.
Joe Manu. And I remember Craig Wing played there for a long time. And it's one of the things I found quite interesting is that when you told me that he didn't play many games.
I was going to say,
and it sort of preserved him.
Very familiar, 100% right. Yeah,
his body was good.
The Japanese season is probably a 6-game trial.
Yeah,
8 to 12 game season, maybe a couple of game playoff. You're doing 15 to 20 games like that, or you're doing 30 games in dummy half for the Roosters.
Getting your head knocked off.
Tackling Jared Hargraves 20 times
exactly.
a game. So you do. Yeah, a lot of guys do. Like they go there, and the Japanese model is actually quite good. It's businesses, it's company-owned teams.
It's owned like by Fujitsu or whatever, Daikin or whatever.
And there's employees, and the locals are playing. They come out of college, they're good rugby players, and then they get jobs for life. So they got half the club are amateur. They train in the morning, they put the suit on, they go and work for the company, Toyota or Panasonic or Canon, and then they come back in after work, and the pros join them after hours, and they train like club team does.
Did you ever think to yourself that you should have gone up to Japan too?
I had a couple of chances, but there was always that rule that if you were playing overseas, you couldn't get picked for Australia.
Right.
And I just always, I just would never have felt comfortable. And as it turns out, I never played that many games for Australia, but I just wouldn't have felt.
But you still did?
Yeah, I did. I played it, but I wouldn't have, I just know what I was like. I wouldn't have been happy with myself if I moved over wherever and I was playing great footy and I couldn't play.
But they pay well.
They did pay well, yeah. Like the offers were always better. But no, I never played overseas. I missed a few years straight with an injury. So I sort of missed about 3.5 of straight. So that might have been the time when I did go overseas. But young family, I was sort of always, I was always happy playing here.